Hello, my name is Christy Potter and I'm the director of the January series, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the January series 2019. It is so good to be together. This is our 32nd year, and we are so grateful to our amazing sponsors who have helped bring these daily lectures year after year for free to our community. In particular, today I'd like to thank Baker Publishing and the Doug and Maria DeVos Foundation for being our series partners, and Meyer Incorporated for being our community partner. I hope you will find ways to thank them as well. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to take care of. Calvin students, be sure to pick up your January series passport and get it stamped at the box office after each presentation that you attend for a chance to win some autographed books and bonus bucks. And also, in case you haven't heard, there has been a change in our schedule for January 10, and Jenna Bush Hager is no longer able to join us because of her NBC schedule, but we are thrilled that her sister Barbara, her twin sister, will be joining us, so please help us spread that word. And now Calvin student Michael Duttler will open with prayer.
My name is Michael Duttler. I am a former CPI student who earned an Associate of Arts degree at Calvin's Ionia campus. I am presently a student here on the Grand Rapids campus studying social work. And I would like to welcome you to the January Series 2019. We would also like to extend a special welcome to 3 of our 52 remote webcast sites, specifically New Brighton, Minnesota, Asheville, North Carolina, and Winchester, Virginia. And now, if you will, pray with me. Holy and triune God, whose thoughts are not our thoughts and whose ways are not our ways, we thank you for Calvin College, for the January series, and for each speaker. Through them, Lord, help us to have greater clarity about your thoughts and your ways, that we might think more deeply, act more justly, and live more wholeheartedly. We ask this all through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Leroy, and I serve Calvin College as its president, and I can't tell you how excited I am that January is here. That may be amazing for you if you don't live in Michigan, but we are so excited for this series, and we're grateful to our sponsors, Holland Litho Printing Services and Howard Miller, for underwriting today's wonderful presentation. It's also my honor to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Todd Cioffi, Calvin Professor of Congregational and Ministry Studies and our Director of the Calvin Prison Initiative. While Todd's biography and achievements could easily fill this entire introduction, I'll focus for the sake of time on his work dealing directly with the Calvin Prison Initiative, otherwise known as CPI. The CPI program is a partnership between Calvin College, Calvin Theological Seminary, and the Michigan Department of Corrections. And I want to thank the leaders of our partner organizations. Warden Burton, who is the warden at the Richard A. Handlon Correctional Facility, whose considerable vision enables this partnership. We're so thankful for you, Warden Burton. Yes. And we're thankful for Dr. Jewel Maidenblick, president of Calvin Theological Seminary. Yes. CPI is completely underwritten by donors and provides a Christian liberal arts education to inmates at Handlon Prison in Ionia, Michigan. This program results in a Bachelor of Arts degree in faith and community leadership from Calvin College. CPI brings hope, dignity, and the opportunity for real accomplishment. Calvin students that I've come to know at West Michigan's Handlon campus have earned and are living the mission of Calvin College right in the context where they are, to think deeply, to act justly, and to live wholeheartedly as Christ's agents of renewal in the world. Todd and his many partners on the faculty and with our partner organizations work tirelessly to ensure that the Handlon campus students are provided the full Calvin experience, from faith integration to academic rigor to a deep sense of community that is palpable when you visit there. And while traditional Grand Rapids campus students have the privilege of being enfolded in the physical space and community environment of the college, Todd also goes the extra mile to make sure that everyone who works there and visits there and works with our Handlon students understand, too, that they are, too, Calvin students. So I'll let Todd share more of this story, the story that God is writing in the lives of our students and all of us who are involved as educators. But for now, I want to welcome him with a warm thank you on behalf of the college. His work has extended our mission, expanded our vision, and sharpened our sense of education and calling. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Todd Cioffi.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It is my honor and privilege to be here with you this afternoon. Oh, there we go. And what I'd like to do is severalfold. First, for those of you who don't know much or anything about the Calvin Prison Initiative, I want to introduce you to the program. Second, if you do know about CPI, I would like to deepen your understanding of this program. Now, I get to give this talk several times, it seems like every month or every several months, and it's one thing for me to tell you about the Calvin Prison Initiative and about how great our students are, but we have a special privilege today, this afternoon, that you'll get to hear it from the students. So now I get asked this question a lot when we give talks like this. Could any of the students from the prison ever come and join you in the talk? And I said, I don't think the Michigan Department of Corrections would like that very much. They like to keep their prisoners inside the prison until at least they're paroled. But we can give you the next best thing. We have 29 minutes of video clips where you will get to hear the CPI students talk about the program, as I like to say, in their own words. And so this will be your opportunity to join them, if you will, as they join you. The last thing I'll say before we get going, this is being videotaped for our CPI students. And so when this is all over, we will get to go into the prison, and they will get to experience the January series talk about CPI. So we'll begin. Let's see here. Before we can talk about the CPI program, we really need to frame the discussion. And so today, I suspect many of you are familiar now with the term mass incarceration. And so the U.S. is experiencing mass incarceration. The problem here is that many of us just don't know maybe what that means. We've heard it a lot, but we really don't know what it means. As I like to say, quite often, our prisons are in the shadows. They're off the beaten track. They're usually in rural areas. We know they exist, but we don't know much about them. And in fact, most of what we know about prisons in the U.S. comes by way of the media, and that isn't always a very reliable source. So we have to frame our discussion of CPI by talking first about mass incarceration. The material that I want to share with you is taken from Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and the Pew Research Center. I want to highly recommend that you get this book by Michelle Alexander. We begin with these years. Between 1980 and 2016, the number of people incarcerated in the U.S., which includes both prisons and jails, soared from 300,000 to more than 2.2 million. By the end of 2007, more than 7 million Americans, 1 in every 31 adults, were behind bars, on probation, or on parole. When we compare these numbers to other countries like the U.S., it becomes even more staggering. So the comparison is to per 100,000 citizens in 2018. Germany incarcerates 77 people per 100,000, France 102, England and Wales 142, Russia 415, and the USA 655. We peaked in 2008 at 1,000. Most of the folks in our jails and prisons in the U.S. are there for drug offenses and often nonviolent drug offenses. About 2/3 of prisoners at the federal level are in for drug offenses, and more than half are in state prisons. When we think about Michigan, it doesn't get too much better. So we have mass incarceration in the United States, but in a sense, we have mass incarceration here, even in Michigan. In 1973, Michigan had 8,000 prisoners. In 2006, it peaked at 52,000 prisoners. And now at the beginning of 2019, we have approximately 39,000 prisoners. The numbers are certainly going down, which is a good thing, but we still have an inordinate number of people in Michigan locked up. From 1973 to 2006, the cost rose nearly 5,000%. The current cost, 20% of the general operating funds for Michigan, or $2 billion a year for incarceration costs in the state of Michigan. I like to put it this way. If I told you that we had $2 billion a year in Michigan to spend on Michigan roads, what would you say? You would like that. You would like that very much. We are spending just over $2 billion a year on incarceration costs in Michigan. We think with the CPI program, as well as others around the state, we think that money could be better spent, maybe for roads, maybe for education and other needs that the state has. 54% of Michigan prisoners have children under 18. It's hard to gauge, but the folks who study these things, their best guess is that without a doubt, children of incarcerated parent or parents are much more likely to go to prison themselves, upwards of 50% more likely. So what we see is clearly a generational trend quite often in incarceration, from parent to child, and so forth. Over the past decade, the number of prisoners who are 17 or younger in Michigan is just over 20,000. So if we have approximately 39,000 prisoners in Michigan, just over 20,000 of them are 17 or younger. We have one student in the Calvin Prison Initiative who went into prison at age 15, and he is now 49. Approximately 20% of Michigan's prisoners have significant mental illness or cognitive disabilities. And so there's great needs there, and this is in part what we saw happen already in the 1980s when the governments began to defund mental health care. The vision of the Calvin Prison Initiative, as you can see quickly, whether we're talking about the country or the state of Michigan, the problems are great. Some commentators have said that the U.S. is addicted to incarceration. We outpace any comparable country when it comes to incarceration. The problems are great. So the question is, what is the vision? Because we need help when it comes to incarceration. As you've heard now several times already, the Calvin Prison Initiative has a moderate set of visions. It's the mission of Calvin College. We hope to equip students in the prison to think deeply, to act justly, and to live wholeheartedly as Christ's agents of renewal in the world. Those four themes are what are going to shape the rest of this talk and the conversation that you're going to be a part of with our CPI students. Before we get there, I want to give a brief history of the CPI program. How did this even get going, where we are today, and give you some of the details of the program itself. What is the program? How do students get in the program? And then what do we hope our graduates of the CPI program will accomplish? The history. Several years ago now, almost 10 years ago, several faculty from Calvin Theological Seminary were invited to go to Louisiana State Prison Penitentiary, or what's also known as Angola. How many of you have heard of Angola Prison before in Louisiana? Several of you. So for quite some time in America, Angola had a notorious reputation. At one time, it was considered the bloodiest prison in the U.S. They have 6,200 inmates. It's the largest penitentiary in the U.S., and geographically, it's the largest. It has 18,000 square acres. It's the size of Manhattan. Angola is the last stop, literally and metaphorically, for prisoners in Louisiana. Just over 85% of all prisoners in Angola are serving life sentences. They will never get out. So in Louisiana, Angola is for the hardest of the hardest prisoners. Back now in the mid-90s, Angola got a new warden, Burl Cain. And Burl Cain had a background in high school education, and here he was now warden of one of the most notorious prisons in the country. And after a few years, he decided to invite New Orleans Baptist Seminary to come into the prison and begin to offer an educational program. And so the seminary began to offer some liberal arts courses, but it also offered biblical studies, theology, pastoral care, and the like, and ultimately leading to a degree. So all of a sudden, Angola had a seminary behind bars. They also have about 30 churches behind bars, and so the idea would be that they graduate from the seminary, and then they staff these churches, senior pastors, associate pastors, deacons, elders, you name it. They have about 450 worship services there in Angola a month, all run by these churches. So a couple Calvin Seminary faculty got invited to go check this out, and they did, and they were blown away by what they saw, and they couldn't believe it. And so after the trip, as they were coming back to Michigan, they wondered, could something like this take place in Michigan? And so some letters were written and phone calls made, and eventually in 2010, they began to offer non-accredited seminary courses at the Richard Handlon facility in Ionia, Michigan. They started with a meager 20 or so inmates, students, and they would run one course per semester, fall, spring, summer. The students loved it. They wanted more and more. And so they kept offering more courses. And over time, the students there wanted some sort of degree. Would that be possible? And so Calvin Seminary folk thought about it, but they were a seminary. A lot of these guys had completed their GEDs in prison with no undergraduate education. So how could the seminary exactly offer a degree? So eventually, the seminary decided that they would look for a college to partner with and maybe begin to offering degree-granting programs there at the Handlon prison. And so they looked around for a college, and lo and behold, they found one. And they said to some folks at Calvin College, hey, would you like to do this? And some of these folks said, not so much. And so they began to shop around, and they went down the street to Cornerstone. And Cornerstone said, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And then the word got out, and then Calvin College said, no, we'll do it. We'll do it. We got this. We'll take this on. And so a partnership formed between Calvin Seminary and Calvin College. In 2015, it was approved, and we began the Calvin Prison Initiative. And the idea would be that we would offer a certificate, an associate's degree, and then a bachelor's degree. The certificate is earned after 30 credit hours, and that takes about 1.5 years for a student to complete. The associate's is 60 credit hours, and that takes 3 years to complete. And Michael Duttler graduated with his associates just this past May. And after those 3 years, 2 more years, and then a student can earn a BA. By June of 2015, Calvin College and Calvin Theological Seminary signed a memo of understanding with the Michigan Department of Corrections. And that's when a true partnership, and dare I say friendship, formed with the 2 academic institutions and the MDOC. We started off with a 1-year contract, and then it went to 2. Now we're up to 5. Who knows? Maybe it will keep going on and on. In December 2015, the Higher Learning Commission approved Handlon Prison in Ionia as a second campus to Calvin College. So Calvin College is technically a 2-campus college, one in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and one in Ionia, Michigan. What is the program? The program is a BA in Faith and Community Leadership at the Richard Handlon Correctional Facility in Ionia, Michigan. It's a 5-year program. We offer 3 courses a semester, with our academic year running a calendar year. So we have a semester in the fall, semester in the spring, semester in the summer. So 3 courses per semester, 3 semesters, a calendar year. We admit 20 students a year, up to 5 years, so that will be 100 students. And then moving forward, we will take in 20 students and graduate 20 students. Currently, our students are split between 2 housing units at the prison. A housing unit holds about 240 prisoners. We have about 50 prisoners, students in one housing unit, and about 25 in another. The day will come when we have students graduating with their BA, and the question obviously comes up, well, then what? Our hope is that our graduates will go out into other prisons, other facilities, and use their leadership degree. And right now, we are considering what that may look like. We haven't done this before, and so we're working out the details as we speak. Our hope is that they'll be involved in prison ministries, tutoring, mentoring, life skills, healthcare, and it could go on and on. Many of our students are already doing these jobs, if you will, these tasks at the Handlon prison, and we're having much success with it. So we're confident that our graduates, as they go out, working in sync with the Michigan Department of Corrections, other organizations and ministries, we think we will be able to transform the prison culture, if you will, from the inside out. What's the criteria for a student to get in the program? Sometimes we like to say jokingly, you first have to have a felony, but there's more. You have to be recommended by a warden of a prison or a chaplain, or you see there in the middle, a principal. To parole in Michigan, an inmate must at very least have a GED. And so a lot of the prisons have GED facilities, if you will, school buildings, where GED courses are taught. There are other programs too, but GED is a big one. So they need principals, and so quite often a principal will oversee 1, 2, 3 or more prisons and oversee those GED educational opportunities. So we want a recommendation from what we think are 3 key people to the livelihood of any prison: a warden, a principal, and a chaplain. To get in the program, a student must have 7 years or more on their sentence. So if they're going to parole in 7 years or less, then this program is not the right program for them. We want to be able to offer a 5-year educational experience, and then we would like to say you have 2 years left where you can be of service back to your community, if you will, in a variety of prisons or one prison. Each inmate must have no major tickets for at least 2 years. A ticket is when a prisoner has a violation, and the tickets are classified. They go from very not severe to very severe. We want a guy to be able to show for 2 years that he can be a good citizen of a prison and not get a major violation ticket. Must have completed high school or, again, the GED. And then we need to know that a potential student has leadership potential. It's a leadership program. And so we want to know, why would you want to be part of a leadership program? Do you see yourself as a leader? Do you want to see yourself as a leader? Do you have that potential? To get at some of this, then, we ask for letters of reference, academic, character references. We want to know as much as we can, just as we would on the main campus here in Grand Rapids, about who these students potentially are as they come into our program. Finally, we ask each inmate to sit down for a proctored set of essay questions, and we want them to respond to 3 essay prompts. 1 indicates motivation. Why do you want to be in this program? What is it about this program that's attracting you? 2, what potential do you think you have? In other words, what do you think you have to offer both the program and beyond? And then 3, how would you assess your own character at this point? Do you have the kind of character that can kind of live into the Calvin College vision? The curriculum. All our students in the CPI program are on the older side compared here to the main campus. And so I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head, but I think the youngest student we have in the CPI program is probably late 20s, early 30s. If you were to come here to the main campus and you're 25 years or older, you would qualify as an adult learner. And that means that not all the courses would apply to you here on the main campus. For instance, foreign languages. If you're an adult learner here, you wouldn't have to take a foreign language course. Although, I have to mention this, many of our students in the CPI program, they would love to have a foreign language. We have yet to figure out how to do that logistically because the courses often meet 4 or 5 times a week and that. But a group of them got together and they came to me and they said, we really, really, really want a foreign language course. And I said, well, if you had to choose one, what would you choose? Japanese. And now, like you're thinking, I said, why? And they said, it just looks fun. And before long, I saw that they had started checking out all the Japanese grammar books out of Heckman Library here. So they would love to learn a lot of foreign languages, apparently. The degree right now is in faith and community leadership with a minor in social work. And then we do have room for several electives. Right now we're working on potentially offering an introduction to business. So a lot of guys are thinking, should they get out? It might be helpful for them to have some understanding of how businesses work and so forth. And so we have some play in the curriculum to offer different electives. I want to introduce you to our first student, and this falls under the heading now, to think deeply.
I came to prison when I was 17 years old. I'd never been to high school. I was fundamentally illiterate when I was in the county jail awaiting trial. And I taught myself how to read and write. I was in maximum security in the county jail, and so I was in a cell by myself, and there was like 4 of us on what is called a pod. And we didn't have a TV, we didn't have a radio, and I was like bored out of my mind. And so my 2 neighbors on either side of me was talking about a story. I didn't know what it was, but they was discussing what had happened in the story as almost like if it was a movie that they had saw. And I asked them, like, you know, what are y'all talking about? And they told me it was a book that they had read. Prior to that, I had never read a book before. I knew how to sound out words. I learned that in elementary school. I knew basic words like the and cat and dog, but I didn't know how to read. I didn't know the benefits of reading. And so just being bored and having nothing to do, I asked them, can I see the book? I didn't tell them I couldn't read though. And so they gave me the book. It maybe took me a month to read that book, just learning how to sound out words and getting every single word right. From that first experience, I was able to get what they was getting, whereas I seen a story inside of my mind unfold as I was reading this story. And I kind of fell in love with it. And so from that point on, I was just reading everything I got my hands on. I would read the rules, I would read stuff on the wall. The more I started to read, I noticed how my vocabulary seemed to increase. I didn't understand why, but that was the result of like doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of writing, and just being able to express myself. In elementary school, the teachers convinced me that I had a learning disability, so I believed that I was slow. I believed that I couldn't do it. And at some point, I just decided, like, well, maybe that wasn't true. You know, maybe I didn't know a lot because nobody sat down to teach me a lot. And so when I embarked upon this opportunity, I decided that I was gonna give myself a chance. You know, I feel like God called me. Like, even though I grew up in this horrible environment, and I feel like this all is an opportunity from God to like do something better with my life. And Calvin Prison Initiative has given me that opportunity, and I'm so grateful.
So Jamie comes to prison as a teenager, and he can't read and write. And now he's in a college program, and he's very successful. I had him in a course this past summer, Intro to Theology, and he earned a B+. And so we're proud of Jamie, and he's proud of himself, and rightly so. We have had many students now achieve academic success I don't know how many times I've heard from our students that way back when, nobody believed them. Nobody believed that they could be smart, that they weren't smart, and that they couldn't achieve in school, and yet here they are now, achieving in a college program. We currently have 75 students enrolled. Our very first cohort from 2015, of which Michael Duttler was a part, was awarded their AA in May, and then they'll earn their BA in May of 2020. Now, are you ready for this? Especially all the main campus students here? The average GPA for CPI students at the end of the spring semester 2018 was 3.53 compared to 3.27 for traditional Calvin students. And I'm not going to let any of the traditional students here get away with saying, but they have all the time in the world to study. No, 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 no. They've earned this. We have had some of the finest students that Calvin College has had in the Calvin Prison Initiative. And we have repeatedly, to a professor, say, it is just a delight to teach in that program. We have had students now who are eager and have done so published in the student newspaper Chimes. If they had their way, there would be a CPI column for every Chimes edition. They love writing and sending it out. We just had our first student get published in Dialogue. We have had one student win a national award for his efforts in restorative justice. Eric Baltazar, you'll meet him a little bit from now. He helped organize a restorative justice conference from within prison, and his efforts won him a national award. So we have had much academic success with our students. I want you to meet some more of our students. If they're asked to think deeply, they're also asked to be just and to act justly.
One day I found the $20 pop card in the vending machine, and I contemplated whether to keep the card or return it to its rightful owner. During my contemplation, I thought about Plato and his philosophy on a well-ordered soul. I also thought about Jesus and meditated on what it means to be in his image. In that moment of reflection, I started to realize the importance that college was having on me. For the first time, I was not thinking about myself. Instead of keeping the card, like many inmates would have done, I chose to return it to its rightful owner. He showed his gratitude by buying me a pop, but the real reward came from applying what I learned from Calvin to make the right decision. Stealing is a norm in the prison culture, so doing an act that is countercultural kind of shows other inmates that we can do the right thing, that we do not have to live as sinners because we've been justified by the grace of God, so let us act like it. And these very small acts will eventually form us to be the righteous person that we have always intended to be. But if we don't show other inmates that these possibilities exist, then we will continue to perpetuate what's normal in society.
When's the last time you heard someone say, before they're ready to act, I thought about Plato and the well-ordered soul, and then I thought about Jesus and what it means to be in his image? That's my first. And so here we have an example where education is opening up new possibilities, new choices. And so Anthony chose to do the right thing. That's a phrase that gets used a lot now in the CPI program. Why would you do that? Because it's the right thing to do. I get questions a lot about why does Calvin College and Calvin Seminary offer this program? Do you make a lot of money at it? Not a dime. Why do you do it? It's the right thing to do. Whether you're reading Plato or Jesus, it's the right thing to do. This question comes up a lot now in the program. Well, what do we owe one another? How is it that we ought to see one another? For a lot of our students, community has not been in their past. It's not been a part of who they are. Prison doesn't always foster community. And so now this question is very poignant. What do we owe one another? What's the relationship we have to one another? And much of what we talk about by way of our courses and whatnot with our CPI students is, how is it now we see each other, and how are we coming together to form a new community, a just community? One of the favorite books of our CPI students is Engaging God's World by Cornelius Plantinga. That book is used often here for developing a Christian mind course during January quite often. I see some students smiling, whatnot. You're familiar with the book. Our students love this book. And one of the things they love about that book is how Plantinga talks about shalom, God's shalom, how God created, and creation has the mark of shalom. Everything is in harmony, at peace. Everything is working together and flourishing. They love that idea, that we can come together as human beings, as Christians, and together we can help one another experience shalom, God's harmony and God's peace. And so the CPI program, in large part, is an attempt to move from disunity to unity. Oops, I want to go back here. One more video here on acting justly. I'm going to set this up just a little bit. It might not be apparent right away. Just here in Grand Rapids on the main campus, so too at the Handlon campus, we have a diverse population there. I like to put it this way. All the people that you know on the outside of prison, they're inside prison. So we have people from all ethnic identities, we have people from all classes, we have some people who are well-educated, some who aren't educated at all. And so we have a lot of diversity and pluralism in the prison too, and we have a lot of religious diversity and pluralism. And so we would like to think that this Calvin program is an inclusive program. It's an opportunity to extend that shalom to any and all who would want to be a part of it. Oops.
When I came to the program, I came with some presuppositions. I knew that the program was a liberal arts education being taught from a Christian perspective. You know, coming here as a Muslim, you know, I was embraced in a way that started reshaping my perception of what Christian and Muslim dialogue would even look like, because they were so welcoming. It has shown me that while Islam and Christianity have a lot of differences, there's also a lot of overlap. You know, one thing that Islam does for me well is instruct me on how to die. There's lots of theology about how to die. There isn't a whole lot of emphasis on how to live well. And so what this program has done is given me tools for living. And so now that I have these tools for living, it has kind of caused me to reevaluate who I am. And so getting this new perspective, getting this reshaping of my identity reminds me of where we should be as a global community. And so now having all of this CPI training, it has made me realize that, well, God has to be bigger than that. The community has to be bigger than that. It doesn't really make sense that God's community would be so small in a world that's so big with so many people. And so now I have to go back, you know, to my community, and I have to say, well, you know, maybe we have not put forth best practices in terms of how we should relate to one another. And so now here I am as a Muslim, 52 years old, with this reform education that is now causing me to look at life differently.
So education and transformation, we are seeing it right before our eyes. Education has a powerful transforming impact on folks. The RAND Corporation, which is a nonpartisan think tank, and they study problems that we're facing both in this country but globally, and then they make policy recommendations for politicians. The RAND Corporation did a meta-study of the effect of educational programming in prisons about 10 years ago. They looked at all the relevant information, and they began to show that any amount of education can have a tremendous transforming impact on prison environments and beyond. So for instance, for someone who receives higher education in prison at any level for any length of time, they are less likely to go back to prison by about 43%, so about half. It increases their chances for employment after release by upwards of about 28%. Now, the more education one receives, the greater the impact on these two marks have. And this is a reminder now. In the US, we spend approximately $212 billion a year in incarceration costs. Every year, we have about 750,000 inmates being released around the country. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, and the RAND Corporation showed that for every dollar spent on educational costs, the states would save $4 to $5 in incarceration costs. It's a great investment. For every dollar spent on education in prisons, they estimate that will save $4 to $5 in incarceration costs. Education has a tremendously transforming impact. The Calvin Prison Initiative, then, is motivated in part by this. We're offering this education, too, as a way to help transform our prisons, and then we add a little bit more. We like to talk about a Christian world in life view. So we are not simply passing along information, but we are passing along a way to see things, a way to experience the world, oneself, and others. As I like to often say, education is always about moral and spiritual formation. The question is, what kind of moral and spiritual transformation and formation? And we are convinced that one of the keys to the success of the CPI program is the fact that we're not just passing information, but we're trying to build a moral and spiritual learning community. Oops. To think deeply, to act justly, and now to live wholeheartedly.
For me, the CPI program is more than just education and academics. It also teaches you how to form into a better person. They want you to live in the image of Christ. I always had two reasons for entering this program. The first reason is that this facility has a vocational village, and I thought to myself, why not start a vocational village in the early stages, for juveniles in detention centers and, get them while they're young. And I realized that that's going to take being able to communicate and express my thoughts. That's one of the reasons that I got in this program. Then the second reason is I am one of the ones that struggle with faith. I always say that I believe in too much to be considered an atheist, but not enough to be a Christian. But the great thing about this program is that there's people from different backgrounds, different religions. Some are believers, some are not, some are on the fence, but it's not exclusive. It's an inclusive club. You can't teach community by excluding. In the 18 years that I've been incarcerated, I've seen the changes that this program has brought. For example, when we go in the common area, that's where the tables and stuff are set up, where guys usually play cards, chess, so that you'll see CPI students in there studying, reading, or doing whatever it is that they need to do for that day. And the trades guys that are here will see that also. And then they'll think, okay, well, if they can do it, then I can sit out here and I can study it. It's contagious. My discernment is different. I'm intentional about things now. I'm aware of my vices. I'm aware of what needs changing for me to live a better life. It's a second chance to make my family proud. It gives them somebody to look up to. My plans is to use this education to be a leader and to someday, one day, start a vocational village for juveniles.
To think deeply, to act justly, and to live wholeheartedly, I like to think of a lifestyle marked by these three attributes as a life that is becoming reconciled. For those people of faith, it's becoming reconciled with God. It's becoming reconciled with one another, with their families and beyond, with the communities that they left behind, often in a broken state. And so people and lives are becoming reconciled. One mark of that, a profound mark of that for our program, has been our now annual Restorative Justice Conference. So back in the fall of 2017, we ran a Restorative Justice Conference. It was a collaboration between the St. Benedict Institute, Hope College, and Calvin College. And one of our students, Eric Baltazar, who's now a senior in the program, he kind of spearheaded this and organized this conference, if you will, mostly from behind bars. He had the help of lots of folks on the outside, but he did a lot of letter writing. He's a Roman Catholic, and he decided to even write the Pope. And he actually got a response from the Vatican. So he was eager to help organize this in any way, shape, or form. We were hoping for maybe 100, 150 people at this conference, which met at Hope College last fall. We had nearly 350 people. And out of that experience, folks at Hope College and Western Seminary, they got excited about this program, and like Calvin Seminary and Angola, they began to wonder, what if? What if Hope, what if Western Seminary began to put together a program and offer it in a prison in Michigan? And I am thankful to say that that is going to happen. And so now Hope College and Western Seminary will begin to offer some courses at a prison in Muskegon, we hope now this spring. And it all started through the reconciling work of these communities. The last conference we had was just this past fall in 2018, and we're looking forward to next fall, 2019. The goal is to help heal, to help reconcile, restore, and rebuild community. Finally, Calvin is eager to help students live out Christ's call in their life as Christ's agents of renewal. We have some wonderful stories of our students who are embracing that and doing just that.
The biggest mission field, I think, is here in prison. We have a field that's ripe for harvest. I'm in CPI, so that kind of helped me find my voice to say, hey, look, Christ is real. This is what Christ has done for me. You know, the Great Commission became real for me. When it comes to developing a Christian mind, it's challenged me to step outside of myself and to not just take what somebody tells me is the truth, but to really get into it. So my Christian perspective is not the same as when I started this program. I had a pretty cut and dry, cookie cutter Christian faith. And now, if somebody were to ask me apologetically to say why I have hope, I have a lot more tools to use to express that. And I'm secure in my faith because of this program. There are talks, and there's already been approval of becoming commissioned pastors after graduation. And then the plan is to hopefully plant churches in prisons. Who better to go out and plant a church in prison than a prisoner? Me personally, with an abusive upbringing, I know what an abused person looks like. I know how that person's defense mechanisms work. So who better to talk to a broken person than somebody who's broken themselves and who can relate? So the hopes for the future for me are to share God's word with as many people as I can, whether it be in prison or out. I appreciate the fact that they've given me an education and a means to step out of myself and to really begin to use those gifts that I've been given. And I think imitating Christ is what CPI does, and it's what I hope every CPI graduate does as well.
And now one more story of Christ's renewing activity here in the prison. And I heard this phrase used by one of our students. The CPI program is like living in a miracle. And so I've attached that title here to the next story you're about to hear.
I've told my story many times about my victim's mother reaching out to me being charged with taking the life of her son. She oversees that and sees the blood of Christ and said, I have to forgive this man. She keeps referring or relying on the power of God to enable her to do what she could not do on her own. She blessed me. She said, I want for you the same thing I would want for my son. She said, I pray that you go inside these prison walls and that you meet God. And that God turns your life around and you become a witness for him. Well, 20-something years later, I found myself in this prison the very same time the CPI comes inside of this prison. And so for this opportunity to fall in my lap, I knew it had to be God. And so for her to hear about how God has been moving in my life and affecting other men, building community, it's mind-blowing. And so now, we're not just laborers and co-laborers with Christ, we're actually laborers together. She encourages that constantly. So much so that she now refers me to as her son. Calvin actually taught me how to build within a community, to build the kingdom of God. I didn't clearly understand that. I have more clarity of that now. And so, healing, faith, and love, that's what the CPI brought to me.
Living in a miracle. When we started this program, we thought we were starting just a program for an education. And we have now discovered that many, many things have happened well beyond our first intentions. And so, as I like to say, there have been so many ripple effects of this program. The next spot that you're about to see is several of our students gathered around a table, and they're just talking about all the ways they've now seen and experienced the impact of the CPI program, all the ripple effects.
What I want to share is one of the most impactful experiences I've had being in this program is the way that you guys supported me through the death of my mother 2 years ago. That was a particularly hard experience for me because as I got closer and closer to the point where I envisioned leaving prison, it was always a plan for me to be there to care for her. And the reality of that not happening hit me pretty hard. I had many of you guys help me, sit with me, pray with me, cry with me. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And this community comforted me beyond my wildest expectations. I never expected something like that was even possible in prison. I think it's one way that this program is making an impact.
That was a beautiful thing. And it was, even now when you're giving the example, it's a beautiful example of the power of community to assist and help people. You know, you actually you see it reach out and touch not just the immediate community of those that are involved in the program, but it goes out to others. The Garden is one such program that we've had. We're going into our third season with the Garden, and when it first started, it came from the desire of wanting to give back to our community. Obviously, within prison, you know, we don't have a lot of opportunities to give back to the community. So it was a unique opportunity that the warden allowed us to be able to give a donation garden, to start a donation garden to meet a need. So the domestic violence hit home for a lot of us. And so Safe Haven Ministries was the ministry that we chose to give to.
We always think about always wanting to give back. And it started with a simple conversation with one person, and it had this ripple effect with the community, and it was about growing our hair. People heard about Locks of Love or children with hair loss. You know, these are kids that are suffering from cancer, alopecia, or some of them have been burn victims. It was, first it started with 2 of us, and then it spread out to 3, 4. Mark was one of us, yes. And eventually it got to 12 of us. It was a humbling experience, man, to see the connection that everybody was making. And it was a blessing to do it, man. You know, we invested over 2 years, and we just, as you see, we just cut our hair this past Saturday, and we mailed out 13 hairs, you know?
You know, we talk about community, and we talk about being examples. Within our faith communities here, we have several services. And from the time that I've been here, I've seen them grow. And not just growing as far as the membership, but growing as far as the leadership within. Some of the brothers have had a chance to preach. You listen to some guys talk in class and give speeches, and you just know, that guy, he's got the gift of preaching. Others you don't hear say a word. And then he gets up one Friday evening and he gives a sermon, and you have tears in your eyes and you're going, where did that come from? Yeah. But he found the strength to do that because he saw the brother before him do it, who got the strength because he saw the brother before him do it, who got the strength through, uplifting of the community. The other thing that we do here that I think is great is with the RTP guys and the OTP guys, guys that have limited mental capabilities. Instead of shunning them like you see at a lot of facilities, we've really brought them in. And it's like we've taken them and made them our own, right? Like we've made them our family. I sat in to lead a group, and it was all RTP guys. And I thought I'll just fill in just because there's nobody here. And it's probably been my favorite group because that faith like a child was present, and it humbled me to my very core, because I'm getting an education and I'm supposed to be this man of faith and this, highly educated individual, and yet a simple act of faith like what they had just made me really internalize what I'm doing.
I can't help but think about the fact that they teach us as much as we teach
Absolutely.
them. I mean, they are the image of Christ. They are our brothers, and we're called to love them and care for them as much as we are our real family.
Calvin goes out of their way, Calvin College and then also Calvin Theological Seminary, they go out of their way to help foster the types of things that produce transformation. And the family picnic, the CPI picnic, is just a brilliant idea that allows us in our striving and our development and our maturation and our transformation to invite our support system to come and celebrate those efforts. And boy, is that a celebration. I've spent time with a lot of you guys as you've celebrated and reflected on what it means to have family members and loved ones participate or recognize or understand that we're striving. I say it this way to some of the younger guys. The first half of my life may not have been very responsible, but I'm committed for this second half of my life to be extremely productive and to have purpose and passion in it. And so when you have the family picnic, it allows family members to come and see what we're doing now. And how awesome is it to have the very people who you want to call when you experience something new or you accomplish something, get a chance to come and celebrate you in those endeavors.
Kind of like what I like about you, that theme, transformation. I hear the theme between all of us and with the Restorative Justice Conference that we helped put on. 3 words come to mind: Christ, Calvin, community. Everything that we've done is in the image of Christ. Like, we see people in the image of Christ. So with the Restorative Justice Conference, Christ challenges people to visit the prisoner. We actually kind of, in a sense, took that a step in the reverse direction, and we went and visited the community.
Amen. Okay.
And how the conference started kind of shows the ripple effect of one kind act. And the conference started with one letter. I wrote a letter to Dr. Jared Ortiz at Hope College. I said, would you be willing to put on a conference about restorative justice with us? And he wrote back within a week, and like, I love the idea. I talked to the board of directors, and here's a date.
Wow.
But I got one caveat. I want you guys to organize the conference. I want you guys to pick out the speakers and everything. And I want you guys to give the talk, the main talk. And now we're on our 2nd annual conference. And one of the great things about it is what Mark talked about earlier, is that we can challenge the community to see prisoners in a different light, that we can transform, that we can change, that we can have a positive effect. The community has been affected in here, but also out there. For example, the Church of the Brethren Mennonite, they took our first conference and dedicated a month-long season to restorative justice based along our conference. We've had a lot of students at Hope and Calvin say that they're now going to be involved in restorative justice and prison reform because of our efforts.
It's inspiring because it shows the true potential of the human spirit and what people are truly capable of.
The opportunity is one thing, but without so many people supporting this program, without so many people taking the initiative to get behind this program, those who support it with prayers, funds, and just encouragement, these opportunities don't happen. And what better place than in an incarcerated situation to see true godly transformation?
I thank you guys for the conversation too, because this has put everything in perspective. It's easy to go through the program and not see everything that's going on. I mean, you don't. And so it's put it in perspective, and I can honestly say that Calvin's mission to rehabilitate morally and spiritually and to change and make people more socially minded, prisoners more socially minded, is working. I mean, just having this conversation, I mean, there's no doubt. And I see it with the new cohorts coming up, them wanting to get active and involved and do the things that we've done before them and continue on. And so I appreciate this conversation.
The ripple effects, the loss of a mother, the building of a community, a garden, domestic violence, and a women's shelter. Long hair, children, and shaved heads. Faith communities, the gospel, and the most vulnerable. A picnic for family and friends of our CPI students. And a restorative justice conference. The last word I want to give to Warden Burton. If you've ever worked in a prison, you'll know that the warden always gets the last word, and so I thought this would be appropriate. But we were able to capture some of Warden Burton's thoughts about this program.
The CPI program has had a huge impact on our facility. The first housing unit that we placed this program into, the CPI program, our misconducts went down by 80%. And so that right there tells me that, this program is taking the facility in the right direction. With the Vocational Village program, we have gentlemen that come here about 18 months before going home. They learn various trades. And so when I take them and place them with the Calvin guys, the success has really gone up. You're talking about reestablishing generational gaps. One of the other things that I think is really neat is they have a garden plot here. And a lot of them have said that during their time before they came to prison, that they may have not treated women the way that men should treat women. And so now what they do is we have a huge garden plot where they grow these vegetables and they donate them to a women's shelter in Grand Rapids. Their way for trying to atone for the wrongs that they've done, in this process of transformation that they're going through. I know our director was called out to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, about prison reform. And they were looking and they were hearing about a lot of the programs we have going on here at the Handlon facility, specifically the CPI, the Calvin Prison Initiative, and the Vocational Village. I had a financial analyst come in from Wall Street. She said that the reason that people on Wall Street and around the country are looking at what we're doing here is because, as a whole, Michigan has lowered its recidivism rate from nearly 50% all the way down to 28%. I mean, you're talking over 20% of people not coming back to prison. So if we could do programs similar to this Calvin program, where we can take larger bites and larger chunks out of our recidivism rates, and I think ultimately we could probably have the lowest recidivism rate in the United States. Anytime you can put a person in a position where they can leave prison better than they were when they arrived, then as corrections professionals, we've done our job. I mean, because the end goal is you want them to be a better person, when they get out than they were before they came. And that's the best way, I think, to correct their behavior, is to make sure you give them the tools and the ability and the training so that they can take care of themselves and their family when they get out. And the basic element of it is, I just think it's the right thing to do.
We're going to close with the Calvin choir. It's the Handlon Tabernacle Choir. They named it that. And the choir is made up of CPI students, and we have our choir director here, Aaron Epp, and they're going to sing Amazing Grace. They're going to sing the first verse on their own, and then on the second verse, we're going to ask that you join them in singing as the ripple effects go well beyond just the CPI program. Thank you.